The frontier homestead stood alone against the vast Arizona sky, its log walls weathered by sun and wind, surrounded by nothing but desert scrub and distant mountains. Jacob Morrison had built it with his own hands 15 years ago, when his wife Sarah was still alive and the world seemed full of promise. Now it was just him and his daughter Emma, trying to carve out an existence in a land that seemed determined to break them. It was October 1882, and the tensions between settlers and Apache peoples had reached a fever pitch. Raids and counter-raids had become routine, with both sides claiming justice while inflicting suffering. Jacob tried to stay neutral, to keep his head down and his family safe, but neutrality was becoming an increasingly dangerous position in a territory divided by violence and fear. Emma was 12 years old, wild as the prairie wind and twice as stubborn. She had her mother's auburn hair and fierce green eyes, and a spirit that refused to be contained by the limitations others tried to place on her. She could ride as well as any cowboy, shoot straighter than most men, and had opinions about everything. Jacob loved her more than life itself and worried about her constantly. One morning, Emma asked if she could ride out to check the northern fence line where their cattle sometimes wandered. It was a routine task, one she'd done dozens of times before. Jacob hesitated, feeling an inexplicable unease, but the work needed doing and Emma was capable. He finally nodded his consent, making her promise to be back before sunset. Sunset came and went. Then twilight faded into darkness, and still Emma hadn't returned. Jacob saddled his horse and rode out with a lantern, calling her name into the vast emptiness, his voice swallowed by the night. He searched until dawn, his heart hammering with a terror that grew with each passing hour. He found her horse grazing near the fence line, saddle still in place, but no sign of Emma. For 4 days, Jacob barely slept or ate. He rode out at first light each morning, searching every canyon and wash, checking with neighboring ranchers, even riding to the nearby cavalry fort to ask if they'd seen her. The soldiers organized a search party, but after 2 days found nothing. They suggested, with uncomfortable looks and carefully chosen words, that she might have been taken by Apache raiders, and that he should prepare himself for the worst. Jacob refused to believe it. He couldn't. Emma was smart and resourceful. She was alive somewhere, and he would find her. On the 4th day, as the sun was setting and painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson, Jacob sat on his porch with his rifle across his knees, staring at the horizon with hollow eyes. He was considering mounting another search in the morning when he saw movement in the distance. 2 riders were approaching. His hand tightened on the rifle as they drew closer, and then his heart nearly stopped. One of them was Emma, sitting tall in the saddle, her hair loose and wild. But she wasn't alone. Riding beside her was an Apache woman, perhaps in her mid-20s, wearing traditional buckskin clothing decorated with intricate beadwork. Jacob stood slowly, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Emma urged her horse forward, and as she came into the light spilling from the cabin windows, he could see she was unharmed, even smiling. The Apache woman held back slightly, her posture wary but not hostile. Emma dismounted and ran to her father, throwing her arms around him. Jacob held her tight, relief flooding through him so intensely it made his knees weak. "Thank God," he whispered into her hair. "Thank God you're safe. Where have you been? What happened?" Emma pulled back, her eyes bright with an emotion Jacob couldn't quite identify, excitement mixed with determination. "Dad, I need you to listen to me. Really listen, okay?" She glanced back at the Apache woman, who remained mounted, watching with dark, intelligent eyes. "This is Nailnish. She saved my life." Jacob's hand instinctively moved toward his rifle, years of frontier prejudice and fear warring with his daughter's words. Emma saw the movement and stepped between him and the stranger. "No, Dad. Listen to me. When I was checking the fence, my horse spooked at a rattlesnake and threw me. I hit my head on a rock and couldn't remember where I was or how to get home. I was wandering, lost and hurt, when Nailnish found me." The Apache woman spoke then, her English accented but clear. The child was sick with fever from the sun. She would have died if left alone in the desert. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact, stating a simple truth without seeking praise or acknowledgement. Emma nodded eagerly. "She took care of me, Dad. She had a camp in the canyon with her grandmother and aunt. They gave me water and medicine for my head. They fed me and let me rest until I was strong enough to ride. And then... Her voice grew quieter, more serious. Then soldiers came. Jacob felt ice form in his stomach. What soldiers? What happened? Nailnish's expression hardened slightly, old pain flickering across her features. A cavalry patrol found our camp. They claimed we were raiders, though we had no weapons, no stolen goods. My grandmother and aunt were shot when they tried to run. I escaped only because your daughter helped me. Emma's eyes filled with tears. They just killed them, Dad. They didn't even ask questions or give them a chance. These women who had saved me, who had been nothing but kind, the soldiers just shot them like animals. I couldn't let them kill Nailnish too. I helped her get to the horses, and we rode away while the soldiers were. She couldn't finish the sentence. Jacob looked at the Apache woman with new eyes, seeing not an enemy but a person who had lost everything. He thought of losing Sarah to fever, the hollow ache that never quite went away, and he could imagine a fraction of what this woman must be feeling. I brought her here because she has nowhere else to go, Emma said, her voice taking on that stubborn tone Jacob knew so well. The cavalry thinks she's a raider now, even though she never hurt anyone. She'll be killed if they find her. But we can keep her safe, Dad. We can hide her until things calm down, until it's safe for her to leave. Jacob wanted to refuse. Every practical instinct told him this was dangerous, possibly fatal foolishness. Harboring an Apache woman while the territory was in the grip of war hysteria could get them all killed. The cavalry wouldn't listen to explanations. The neighbors would turn on them. They could lose everything. But then he looked at his daughter's face, at the fierce determination there, the absolute certainty that this was the right thing to do. Emma immediately took charge, bringing water and food, chattering in a mixture of English and the few Apache words she'd learned. Nailnish accepted the offerings with quiet dignity, eating slowly and sparingly as if unused to having enough. Jacob sat at the table, his rifle now leaning against the wall, watching this surreal scene unfold in his cabin. "You speak English well," he finally said, breaking the silence. Nailnish looked at him directly, her gaze steady and assessing. "I was educated at a mission school when I was young. The teachers thought they could make me white by teaching me white man's ways. They failed." There was no bitterness in her voice, just simple statement of fact. "What will you do?" Jacob asked. "Where will you go?" "I don't know," she admitted. "My people are scattered. Some are on reservations, some are still fighting in the mountains. My family was trying to reach relatives in Mexico, but now..." She didn't finish the sentence, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Emma spoke up fiercely. "She's staying here. With us. At least until it's safe." Jacob met his daughter's eyes and saw no room for argument. He sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. "We'll need to keep you hidden. If the cavalry comes asking questions, you'll need to stay out of sight. And the neighbors, they can't know you're here." Over the following days, they established a routine born of necessity and caution. Nailnish stayed primarily in a small storage room off the main cabin during daylight hours when visitors might come by. At night and in the early morning hours when the risk was lower, she helped with chores, moving silently through tasks with an efficiency that spoke of hard experience. Jacob was initially uncomfortable with the arrangement, centuries of cultural prejudice hard to overcome even with the best intentions. But as days turned into weeks, he began to see past his preconceptions. Nailnish was remarkably skilled. She knew which desert plants could be eaten and which could heal. She could track animals with uncanny accuracy, and she understood the rhythms of the land in ways Jacob had never learned despite 15 years of living there. One evening, when a late autumn storm threatened their cattle, Nailnish ventured out with Jacob and Emma to bring the animals to shelter. Working together in the driving rain and wind, Jacob saw how naturally she moved through the environment, how she seemed to read the weather and the animal's behavior with intuitive understanding. When a spooked steer nearly trampled Emma, it was Nailnish who reacted with lightning speed, pulling the girl to safety. That night, huddled by the fire as the storm raged outside, Jacob made coffee and offered Nailnish a cup. She accepted with a small nod of thanks. Emma was already asleep, exhausted from the day's efforts, curled up under a blanket on her bed. "Thank you," Jacob said quietly, "for saving Emma today. And for saving her before, in the desert." Nailnish studied him over the rim of her cup. "Your daughter has a good heart. She didn't hesitate to help me when she could have let the soldiers take me. That kind of courage is rare." "She's her mother's daughter," Jacob said, and found himself talking about Sarah for the first time in years. He told Nailnish about building the homestead together, about Sarah's death from fever, about trying to raise Emma alone and constantly fearing he was failing her. Nailnish listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke. "My husband was killed 2 years ago in a cavalry raid. We had been married only 3 months. My son was born after his death, but the baby lived only 4 days." Her voice was steady, but Jacob heard the ocean of grief beneath the calm surface. "I understand loss. It is something our peoples share, even if we share little else." That conversation marked a turning point. Over the winter months, an unlikely friendship developed between the grieving widower, his spirited daughter, and the Apache woman who had lost everything. Nailnish taught Emma tracking and plant lore, skills that would serve her well on the frontier. She taught Jacob techniques for water conservation and desert farming that his European approach had missed. In return, they gave her safety, companionship, and a place to heal from her losses. The arrangement wasn't without challenges. Twice, cavalry patrols came by asking if Jacob had seen any Apache raiders in the area. Both times, Nailnish hid in the storage room while Jacob lied convincingly to the soldiers, his heart pounding with fear of discovery. Neighboring ranchers occasionally stopped by, and Jacob had to deflect questions about why he wasn't participating in the local militia's Apache hunts. As winter gave way to early spring, Nailnish began to talk about leaving. The territory was slightly calmer, and she had made contact through carefully passed messages with relatives in New Mexico. She could travel there, start over with what remained of her extended family. Emma was devastated at the prospect of her leaving. Over the months, Nailnish had become like an older sister or young aunt, a bridge between Emma's memories of her mother and her emerging identity as a young woman. Jacob, too, found himself reluctant to see her go, though he couldn't quite articulate why. The cabin would feel empty without her quiet presence. But before plans could be finalized, crisis struck. A neighboring rancher's son spotted Nailnish from a distance when she was helping repair a fence and recognized her distinctive beadwork pattern. He rode into town and reported to the cavalry that Jacob Morrison was harboring an Apache woman. A full patrol arrived at sunset, led by a lieutenant who Jacob recognized from previous visits. The man's face was hard with anger and betrayal. "Mr. Morrison, we have reports you're hiding an Indian woman here. Step aside and let us search the premises." Jacob stood in his doorway, rifle in hand, knowing this was a fight he couldn't win but unwilling to step aside. "She's done nothing wrong. She's not a raider. She saved my daughter's life. The law says all Apache outside the reservation are considered hostiles," the lieutenant replied. "You're breaking the law by sheltering her. Now step aside, or we'll charge you with treason." Emma appeared beside her father, her own rifle held with surprising steadiness for a 12-year-old. "She's family," Emma said firmly. "And we don't turn our backs on family." The standoff might have ended in violence if Nailnish hadn't appeared behind them, stepping out into the doorway with her hands raised peacefully. "I will go with you," she said calmly. "These people have done nothing wrong. I came here uninvited. Don't punish them for my presence." "No," Emma cried out, but Nailnish shook her head. "Your father and daughter have given me something I thought I'd lost forever. They've shown me that kindness can still exist between our peoples. But I won't let them be destroyed for helping me. That is not the Apache way." The lieutenant looked uncertain now, clearly not expecting the Apache woman to surrender peacefully or to speak so eloquently. Jacob made a desperate decision. He lowered his rifle and stepped forward. "Lieutenant, this woman saved my daughter's life when she was lost in the desert. She nursed her back to health and brought her home safely. Then my daughter returned that kindness by helping her escape from soldiers who had just killed her grandmother and aunt, women who were unarmed and trying to reach the reservation peacefully. Is this the justice the cavalry stands for? Killing innocents and punishing those who show mercy. The lieutenant's jaw tightened. Several of the soldiers behind him shifted uncomfortably. One of them, an older sergeant, spoke up. "Sir, if she was heading to the reservation, that's different from raiding. And if these folks are vouching for her." The lieutenant was clearly torn between duty and conscience. Finally, he made a decision. "I'm going to pretend I didn't see her. You have 24 hours to get her to the reservation at Fort Apache, or I'll have to report this. And Morrison, don't make me regret this." They rode away, and Jacob stood in his doorway shaking with relief and residual fear. Nailnish placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said simply. "Both of you." They prepared through the night. Jacob would escort Nailnish to Fort Apache personally, carrying documentation of how she'd saved Emma and letters vouching for her character. Emma insisted on coming along, refusing to be separated from either of them. The journey took 3 days. When they arrived at the fort, they found a sympathetic officer who listened to their story and verified the circumstances. Nailnish was allowed to register at the reservation and was assigned a small plot of land. It wasn't freedom, not really, but it was safety and a chance to rebuild. Before they parted, Emma hugged Nailnish tightly, tears streaming down her face. "I'll visit," she promised. "And when I'm older, when things are better, you can come back." Nailnish smiled sadly. "You have given me hope when I had none. Both of you have shown me that not all white people are the same, just as not all Apache are the same. Perhaps someday, others will learn this too." Jacob extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Nailnish took it. In that handshake was an acknowledgement of shared humanity, of bonds formed across cultures that were supposed to be enemies, of the courage it takes to choose compassion over fear. As they rode away from the fort, Emma was quiet for a long time. Finally she said, "Dad, we did the right thing, didn't we?" Jacob looked at his daughter, this fierce young woman who had risked everything for someone who needed help, who had seen past prejudice and fear to the person beneath. "Yes," he said firmly. "We did exactly the right thing." Years later, when Emma was grown and the Apache Wars were finally over, she would return to Fort Apache and find Nailnish married to a respected tribal leader, working as a teacher and bridge between cultures. The friendship forged in that desperate winter would last a lifetime, a testament to the truth that humanity transcends the boundaries that people try to draw between themselves. And Jacob would tell the story to his grandchildren, how his daughter had come home after 4 days with an Apache woman and declared, "We will keep her safe," and how that moment of choice had taught him that courage isn't about who you're willing to fight, but who you're willing to protect, regardless of the cost.